Ed Banish. I'm the co-chair of Braver Angels Laramie County Alliance, along with Tom Brantley, the other co-chair. Thank you. We're joined by Bob Wilson, who just spoke to you, who will be our panel moderator this evening. When you arrived, you were welcomed by 5 key volunteers: Lindy Kirkbride, Stevie Ganniston, Linda Banish, Pam Stimpson, and Carolyn Richard. They have provided some deeply appreciated support to get you in the doors and in your seats. Thank you. This evening, we're going to learn what 12 key community leaders are doing or hope to do to improve racial ethnic relations. Welcome, panelists. We are grateful to each of you for saying yes and for being here this evening. For all of us, this is our opportunity to discover from the panelists how we might use their ideas in our own lives. Just as a note, we had 94 folks sign up, registered, and we have at least 10 that have walked in and been registered as they walked in. So right now we're right at 100 or so people. Thank you for all of you. We also have 3 individuals who are very unique this evening in the audience. In addition to our panelists, we have Mike Whalen from Fort Collins. Getting to know each other, listening deeply to each other, sharing respect and compassion each day, it takes an ongoing commitment to create and sustain a beloved community. Now, your moderator, Bob Wilson.
Thank you, Ed. I'm extremely honored to be your moderator tonight, and a lot of that is because of tonight's panel. We're going to hear various perspectives on the topic question, which is, how does or could your organization or community group improve racial ethnic relations, specifically within Laramie County? I'm a member of the Laramie County Braver Angels Alliance Planning Committee. However, the main reason that I got tapped to be your moderator tonight is because I'm also a Toastmaster at the Roadmasters Club here in Cheyenne. And this isn't a usual Braver Angels workshop format, so we're going to be using some of the protocols from Toastmasters events that are similar to this. The panel format gives each panelist up to 5 minutes, and we encourage you all to use your 5 minutes for your opening remarks. We don't have time to read aloud introductions for these esteemed panelists, but each of you should have picked up on the way in a handout that has the bios for our panelists. We have to be strict on timing. Panelists, there is a timing light. Cliff, could you show us the green, yellow, and red lights? And the reason we're doing this is to give you opportunities to wrap up your comments in your last minutes. The green light will go on at 4 minutes, which means you got about a minute to go, and then the yellow light at 3 minutes, and the red light at 5 minutes sharp. And just in the interest of allowing time for the audience questions, we are going to be pretty strict about that, but I will do it gently if you run long. We won't have to turn off your mic, but I'm sure you will all be gracious to us on that. Audience, time is short. So we ask, this is going to be hard, to refrain from interjections, whether positive or negative, and refrain from applause until the very end, when we will give a rousing round of applause for all of our panelists. And audience, did everybody get a card? If you got a card, I did not pick one up because I'm not going to be writing any questions. I'll be reading them. You're going to be submitting those questions at the end of this session. I believe we're going to have them pass down the aisle and somebody will pick them up. And in the 10-minute break between the hour of the opening remarks and the second hour of Q&A, the panel will have opportunities to answer the questions that have been pre-screened by our co-chairs, Ed Banish and Tom Brantley. 3 points. One of the points, I'll reiterate what Ed said. be kind, ask questions to seek understanding, and be curious. Second, be concise, because a really complex question is going to take more than the 2 minutes or so that we're hoping that each panelist will be able to answer your question. Third, be legible. Use good penmanship. If Ed and Tom and I cannot read your question, we won't be able to use it. So please fill out your cards, and if anybody needs a pen or a card, please raise your hand now. So if we could get somebody to address, we have two up front here and one over there for Marty. You can write a question or even two on the same card. So if you have two possible questions, put them both down. We probably won't use them both in order to give everyone a chance, but we will be able to pick things up. And with that, I would like to start our panel discussion. Our first panelist is Mayor Patrick Collins. Mayor Collins.
Check. Thank you, Pastor. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I would like to say thank you to Ed and Tom for the Bravery Angels and for putting this group together today. When they came to talk to me and invited me to be part of this, I wanted to tell them no. Let's be honest. And I think Ed would tell you, I was squirming. I didn't want to do it. You know, because I'm trying to think of what does a 63-year-old white male, straight, married to his wife for 41 years, have to add to a discussion on race? Let's be honest. What could I bring? But then I thought, I am the mayor of the capital city of the equality state, and it's important for me to share the message that discrimination and hate are not allowed, not acceptable, not what we want in our community. And so I wanted to say that right off the bat, that from your mayor, that's how I feel. 5 minutes after I was sworn in as mayor, I was starting my little speech that I gave, and this is one of the sentences that I put in there. It says, "We must remember that Cheyenne is the capital city of the equality state, and my administration will try to fight discrimination wherever we find it." It was easy to say that, but when you get in the office, you realize that you don't really have a lot of power. I was not elected king, I was elected mayor. And so you don't really have a lot of power. So it has been a little bit more challenging in these areas than I would have thought. The other day I was at the Not in Our Town, and I shared with that group that I do love Cheyenne. I think it's a great place, but we can and we should be doing better in a lot of areas, including this idea of race. One of the things that brought racism right into my face was an incident that happened on the Air Force Base. We had a family who moved to Cheyenne, and one of the folks that was involved is a lieutenant on the base. He's not your normal lieutenant, a young guy. He's an older fella, and he had kids that were one in high school, one in junior high school. They're an African-American family. The girl was going to go to Central High School, the boy to McCormick Junior High School. The girl's excited. She's going to her first day of school to her new school, and as the door of the bus opens, before she even put her foot on the ground, somebody called her the N-word. And that was her welcome to Cheyenne, Wyoming. Her son, the father, was a football player in college. And when you see him, you'd understand. He's about 5'7", but he's round. And he was a running back, and he was relentless. And his son wanted to play football. And so he's at McCormick Junior High School. He was systematically, racially discriminated against to the point where that family had to leave Cheyenne. The Air Force, thank goodness, was able to find him a new place. He sent him to Washington, D.C. But I asked and got a chance to meet with that father. Now, I'm a father of two boys, 28 and a 32-year-old. And I sat across the table from him as he told that story to me. And I could see the hurt in his eyes. And so while I have never experienced racism, I sure felt it that day through that experience with him. And to be honest with you, I felt helpless. What do you do? As a mayor, what could I do? And so it was really a gut check and a really hard time for me. So we were asked, what can we do? And I think one of the things that we can and should be doing is we need to talk about it openly and honestly. I think that's the first step that we have to do. And so I've been trying to do that since that meeting with the lieutenant. I've been trying to do that. When I go and see the Women's Civic League, when I had a chance to speak in front of the Chamber of Commerce, the Kiwanis Club, my Mayor's Youth Council, Junior Leadership, Leadership Cheyenne, anytime I get a chance to talk in front of those groups, I tell that story or a story similar to it, and I ask those people to understand and, to say it does happen in our community and to be aware of it. The other thing is that I think that there are some really cool things going on right now. Not in Our Town is coming. We have the MAFA coming here with Dr. Peoples next Saturday, I believe, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. There's a lot of opportunities for us to get together and continue those conversations. And so I think that that's one of them. The other thing is I would really ask everybody that can hear us to think about educating their children and talk about how hurtful that is. I think the use of the N-word has become kind of a cool thing, but it's not. And so I'd ask you to educate your kids. And then we had the U.S. Attorney educating us on hate crimes the other day. And then I think we just try to make some changes that maybe will make us uncomfortable. We need to start inviting people who don't look like us, who don't love like us, who don't go to church like us, to be part of our groups, our boards and our commissions. And if I could, I'd just end with a quote that a dear friend of mine told me today at lunch. It came from Dr. King. He said, "The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and the cruelty by the bad people, but by the silence over that by the good people." Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Zwanitzer, you're up.
Thanks. And so I was asked to talk about the state legislative level and things that we've done, both for Laramie County and throughout Wyoming when it comes to race relations. As I think most of you are aware, we are the third whitest or Caucasian percentage state in America. And if you weren't aware, we are also the most Republican legislative state, currently 86 Republicans, 7 Democrats in our state legislature. So race relations and some of that type of legislation is not prevalent in Wyoming like it is in other states throughout the country. And I actually went back 15 years and really only found 2 pieces of legislation that dealt with these issues. We did have a couple of bills on Native American culture promotion and keeping their language in schools and preservation of their history here in Wyoming. But really the only other 2 bills we've dealt with when it comes to racial equality, one 2 years ago, some of you may remember, was involving covenants. And so Representative Duncan from Lingle was a realtor, and we had struggled for a long time, especially here in Laramie County, with covenants that have been 120 years old, basically preventing African Americans from buying homes in certain parts of town, or allowing, specifically it would say, no blacks are allowed after sunset, or they would have to come in the back door of houses. In many of our communities in the greater downtown area, east of Snyder, south of Pershing. And so every time you'd have a buy-sale transaction, both the seller would have to, give the covenants and sign, and the buyer would have to read these same kind of hateful covenants and sign off that they understood, even though, since the 1960s, the U.S. Supreme Court and federal laws had overruled them. But it was nice. We did find a way eventually that we could just file a document with the courthouse, and so over time, you weren't required to put this information in front of sellers. The information would be at your county courthouse on those covenants, but every time, 2 different people bought and sold property, they weren't having to sign this disclosure statement. That passed 30-0 in the Senate and 58-2 in the House. And so kind of the first major race bill we'd had in a long time, overwhelming passage. Certainly, you're all aware, we do not have a hate crimes law in Wyoming. We're one of 2 states left that do not have any type of what we'd call bias-motivated crimes. The Republican Party platform, as well as many members of my caucus in the Republican Party, feel strongly that everyone is equal and that no one deserves special privileges or special rights, and that extends to special punishments or enhanced punishments. And so with that, we've only had the hate crimes or bias-motivated crime bill up twice in the past 20 years in Wyoming, but it really has turned into an economic issue, right? When you're one of only 2 states that doesn't have anything in statute that, prevents bias-motivated crimes, and you're a national business, you basically say, hey, we're not even going to look at Wyoming as a place to move our business or our employees because of the lack of the hate crimes. And so certainly we can talk about economic development, but that's really been the conversation more in the legislature when it comes to a hate crimes or bias-motivated crime bill. Is it's an economic development issue at this point because people aren't coming to Wyoming, and it's certainly interfered with our relationship with the military on our Air Force base that we don't have some of these protections in our statute. So I'm pretty confident that issues in the future that come forward, we have a good track record of taking them seriously and working for the benefit of Wyoming. But again, it has been rare, and the budget session coming up, I haven't seen anything when I reviewed the legislation that really deal with these topics. But certainly if you have ideas this evening that you'd like to bring forward, that you'd like to see kind of a statewide level statute, budget amendment, program, et cetera, be instituted, certainly open to hearing that discussion and look forward to those comments.
Thank you. Chief Mark Francisco.
Good evening, everyone. It's really heartening to see a crowd like this come to an event like this. Without going too much into my background, I've not been here in Cheyenne not quite 3 years, and so I came from a much larger community, Kansas City, Missouri, and what I've learned since I've been here is that we as a group can get together in meetings like this and have a respectful conversation and attempt to come up with some impactful solutions that affect us all. Without going into too much detail, it wasn't necessarily like that where I came from. So I too, like the mayor, wanted to say no when I was approached to participate in this. For different reasons, though, these conversations can be very uncomfortable, but we have to have them. So, I put my fears of participating in something like this aside, and, hopefully for the greater good, we can all get together and talk about the issues. And it's a good opportunity for me to do a temperature check of the community and see how you view specifically where my concern is the police department. Police departments all over the country struggle to maintain legitimacy amongst the people they serve, and it's so important. And the one thing I've noticed since I've been here is the cooperation we get from the community. Again, not necessarily prevalent in other places of the community. It helps us a great deal to, provide for the public safety when we get cooperation from the citizens we serve. I tell my guys all the time, I say, look, you have to maintain and nurture the community support that you have, because if you lose it, it is very difficult to get back. I've worked in that environment. It's terrible. It's a struggle for everyone, not just the police, for everyone. So, our goal is to maintain as much transparency as we can in what we do. But I look forward to hear your all's thoughts on that and answer whatever questions that I can. So me not being a professional public speaker, I'm not using nearly all my time. So we're going to move on.
Well,
Our next speaker is Judge Ron Jeffrey, and that is a very directional mic. So, Judge, if you'll have to hold it fairly close to your mouth and point it straight at your mouth.
okay. Can you hear me okay?
Can the audience hear him okay?
Well, one way to control me is to make me have to hold my hands. Because I don't know how I'm going to talk without my hand flying all over the place, but very quickly here. It's interesting because I heard many of the panelists talk about their feelings when they were asked to do this. And I had similar feelings, but for different reasons. It's kind of interesting when this kind of subject comes up. And I've been around a lot of years in this community, and some of me is a little tired that we keep having to talk about it because it leads to that point where people feel like, wow, we keep talking about it, but what are we doing about it? And I shared that with the gentleman earlier today. We were talking. And I think I realized the mayor said something about, and I think I wrote it down here, about talking about it openly and honestly. And I think that's the key on why I decided it was important to be here. And I'm going to focus on the last two words he said, open and honestly. I don't think we've always spoke about this issue in an open and honest manner. I think we tended to think about what we wanted to say it in a way that it felt the most appropriate, but also say it in a way where it fit what our desires were. If we wanted to keep something a certain way, for instance, if we wanted to pass legislation or laws that would keep certain things out, we kind of twisted our thoughts and beliefs to fit what our needs were. And so we weren't really all that open about it. We talked as if we were, but we weren't as open as we should have been. And what I liked about what the mayor said is the second part of that, is when we honestly look at our beliefs and thoughts, then we can really begin to see how those thoughts are affecting what we do and what we try to accomplish for people. A lot of people come to something like this, they have an agenda. They want to make sure this part is covered or that part isn't covered, or their thoughts are supported or their thoughts are not supported. Instead of coming into a room like this and saying to ourselves, the thing I can do most is open. I tell parents all the time, do you know how kids see their parents? They see them like this. A mouth that's always telling them what to do. And I said, it'd really be interesting if kids started to see their parents like this, like an ear, somebody that's willing to listen to them. To be open and honest, you've got to be willing to listen to the people that you're going to talk with, particularly when you have differences and feelings about things. It's funny, I was jotting down something, and the first thing I thought about was, about being on this panel, is do we really know what racism and what biasness means and those things? So I put down some thoughts for myself. And I said that, you know, there's a distinction in my mind between bias, racism, and discrimination. And I think for me it's important that that foundation be established with some clarity in terms of those areas. And let me give you an example of what I mean. For me, I look at bias and discrimination as three separate issues that build on each other. Essentially, I look at each one as a stepping stone to higher and more disturbing behaviors. And let me start with bias. In my view, bias is generally the first step, and it refers to preferences. And in other words, these are the things we like. You know, we all have them, all of us. I don't care whether you're a judge or whether you're a chief of police or whomever you happen to be. We have preferences. We have things we like. Some prefer hamburgers. Some prefer hot dogs. Some prefer tall. Some prefer short. We all have them. My point in saying that is we cannot walk into a setting and say, I'm not biased, but we are. You know, but there have been numerous studies. I remember a psychological study that was done that put people on a corner to try to see if they could influence their behavior. And they were able to establish from this that from the very beginning when we see someone, we establish people as superior or equal or inferior to us. We don't know that we do that, but we do it. And by doing it, it gives us, we make decisions about those people based on that. So I wanted to say that. I think it's important we know that that's something we have. The second step when it comes to leading to what's more detrimental than bias is when we group people together based on those biases. When I believe that all tall people, you know, are going to play basketball, or all short people, I guess, are going to, I don't know, play soccer. That shows you how much I know about the sports. But my point in saying that to you is when we start to group people together, then all of a sudden we get in trouble. When all of a sudden, wow, I'm in the middle. I just noticed the orange light. When we start to group people together in the way that we see them, then the end result of it is it leads us to that last stage that we can get to. I wanted to say more about that, but in terms of how we group people together. Is that 5 minutes, really? Okay, last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up, is that the last stage of that is discrimination. And the one thing I want to say about that is that is the element that is the most destructive when we come to racism and other issues. Is now we're talking about acting on those biases, treating our superior beliefs and thoughts as being better than your beliefs and thoughts.
Chris Zimney.
I cede my time to Ron Jeffrey to continue. Can I do that?
No.
Okay, Bob. With these issues, my perspective is from the school district. So looking at what's happening with our children. We've heard examples from families of those that serve in the military. We've talked with families that have been here for generations. We've talked with brand new families to our area. And when we look at these events, we look at, okay, what are we going to do about it? For the school district, with the McCormick issue, the school board came out with our call to action. And they came out and said, we will not put up with this. We're going to deal with it. It happened. What are we going to do? And so through that, we were also developing our strategic plan. And we're looking at student readiness, we're looking at community connection, we're looking at healthy environments. Because these children are our most precious resource. A lot of people use that phrase, but honestly, we can give everything else up, don't give up our children. And so when we're looking at these things, be it bias, be it bigotry, racism, discrimination, any of those things, a lot of what's going on in our schools is reflected in our communities or coming from our communities. Our kids are a microcosm of our environment. And so where are they learning this from? Is it inherently they think it's funny, they think they can gain status, power, something from doing these things, they can get domination, or were they taught this? And as a school, we're in charge of academics. But we're also in charge of developing our next group, our next generation. And so with that, we've got to look at what do we do about this? A lot of people talk about discipline, and yes, discipline will occur. And that's something that we've got to do, but we also need to remember that those students are coming back. Those kids are coming back into that building. And just because we put a kid on a 5-day suspension does not mean we've solved the problem. If I've got a kid that doesn't know math, do I suspend him for 5 days and say, when you come back, you better learn it? We cannot do that. So what do we need to do? Because those relationships have been harmed. From what you've said, what you've done, you have hurt somebody. And so a lot of what we're talking about is what is the things that we can do preventatively to stop it from the beginning, but also if it does occur, what do we need to do to restore the environment and the safety to that environment to promote understanding, respect, civility, and empathy for each other, and also empowering our students to use their voice. I can speak from our level with students. A lot of them feel like nobody listens, kind of like you were talking about, is we talk at them. We don't talk with them. We don't listen to them. What I deal with are student issues generally directed at other students. And so what is it that is causing this? We've got to get down to those bare bones and work with individuals on interventions. Because we know, collectively, you walk into our community at the age of 18, those behaviors that some would say, oh, that's just kids being kids, that's just kids learning. At the age of 18, we put them in front of these two gentlemen. And we say, nope, you just broke the law. Well, for however many years I was in a school and people said, oh, you're just being kids. No, we have to prepare them for what is going on. And what we're doing with that, we are working on empowering student voice through various activities, sources of strength. It's a suicide prevention program, but it dives deeper into resiliency, talking about how do you get through hard times? How do you help people that are going through hard times? We're also talking about making sure there's opportunity for our students. Those that are underrepresented, where are we hearing their voices? Such as things as the Black Scholars at East High School. We're looking at international clubs, building that understanding. We want to make sure that our students have that representation. Is that in their curriculum, making sure it's relevant, making sure we have updated curriculum, resources that don't just speak to heroes and holidays, but actually speak to an experience so we can understand those things, and making sure that we build community partnerships, which my colleagues will be talking about, that we also are a part of.
Amy Speaker.
Thank you. So you do really have to talk right into it, don't you?
You really have to talk straight into it. And let me interrupt for just a second. Don't turn the light down, if you would, Mr. Timer. And also, don't start our time yet. Some of these folks and some of these panelists have professional responsibilities that they cannot speak to specific incidents or specific people. So please watch out for that as you're submitting your questions. And Amy.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. Like others on the panel, I did kind of think about why I was asked to be on the panel and what value I could add. And as Judge Jeffries mentioned, I think we all have biases, and I think that's one of the reasons that I can be here tonight is to talk about my own biases and how those biases and my awareness of those and my continual learning of what those biases are can help me understand and then help the organizations I'm a part of do better by hearing from others. So I am a part of a group called the Laramie County Community Partnership, and our goal is to make people healthier in Laramie County, help them be healthier. And we do that by bringing lots of different folks to the table to talk about activities in the world of health. And as many organizations we had a bit of a call or awakening after the murder of George Floyd. And we were asking, are we doing enough as an organization to be conscious of how we perpetrate racism, how we express our biases, and how can we explicitly acknowledge those, and and how do we hold ourselves accountable? And so we used a systematic way of doing that, and I kind of took the question really literally of what can we do. So I was going to share a little bit about what we did, and I think many organizations could follow suit. We used a toolkit, which there are a million different toolkits that you could pick from. We happened to use one from the American Public Health Association, and it asked us to reflect. It asked us to stop and think about what we were doing, the ways we were doing it, and why. It had us walk through our governance. How did we select board members? Were we intentional about it? Who did they represent in our community? And was it representative of our community? The programs that we supported, did they have a mission? Were they serving people equitably? And who's benefiting and who's included? And then by kind of contrast, who's not included? Looking at the partnerships we have, who had we invited to the table just because we happened to know them, they were our neighbors, and how did we not systematically think about people that maybe were a little bit outside of our orbit, and how could we bring those folks in? Also in our communications, I think this is something that, we know that in our community, we have a large population that speaks Spanish. How are we making sure that our message and our opportunities are shared with the Spanish-speaking population? Even just small things like accessibility. Is our website super accessible for someone that's colorblind? That's, very small things, but things that can really go a long way in making sure that we're including all voices. And lastly is advocacy. How are we showing up in spaces where our partners are inviting us and making sure that we aren't just asking them to our table, but we're going to others' tables as well. So I think that's one place where we were able to do this. Now, we had to rank ourselves in many different ways, from doing really well to needs improvement. And when we did this assessment, we really found that needs improvement was where we were on a lot of the issues. So we really did work to come up with a plan to identify ways that we could improve. And one of the ways that we did that was we added a new action team, which is the way that we get work done in that organization. And we added an action team called Better Together, which I invite any of you to join. And it's really named Better Together after a quote from Heather McGee, who wrote a great book called The Sum of Us, which I highly recommend. And the quote is, we are greater than and greater for the sum of us. And so really talking about the partnerships that we can have together. 5 minutes goes very fast. So the other hat that I wear is with CRMC, and CRMC, I think, took similar steps. We didn't use the same toolkit, but again, bringing to attention our own biases, bringing to attention how our biases might seep into our policies and how they might seep into the way we provide care, asking questions of our community members and stakeholders. So we went through a 6-month process of bringing together our community partners to basically listen. What has your experience been? And then creating a roadmap that we recently approved to kind of move forward on how we're going to address how these things show up in our organization and where we can do better. And so thank you so much. I do have one other thing, the map that was talked about with the racial covenants. If you're interested in knowing if your address has those racial covenants, you can go to LaramieCountyHealthMatters.org and type in your address, and it will show if you live in one of the areas that is affected. Thanks.
Thank you. Dale Steenbergen.
Well, good evening, everyone. You made the comment about how fast 5 minutes goes. I grew up a Southern Baptist kid in Oklahoma, and I had an old pastor named Reverend Dixon tell me one time, you know, the sermon goes a lot faster when you're giving it than it does when you're sitting out in the audience listening to it. So I just appreciate everyone being willing to spend a few minutes of a time that you can never get back here this evening to have a conversation and talk about this very important issue. One of my favorite, I'd call him a philosopher, others might not, but a guy from my home state, Will Rogers, you know, he made a comment, there's 3 kinds of people in the world. There's those who learn by reading, they just read it and take it for fact. There's those who learn by hearing, so they hear it and they learn it and they do it. And I won't say it exactly like he said it, you can go look up the quote, but there's a third kind of people, and they just have to go out and touch the electric fence, right? You know, I think that's kind of been the experience of America since the beginning, right? We have had to go through some things and work through issues and try to come out better on the other side. I am encouraged nowadays, I think, in our own community that we're beginning to see that the only way for us to truly succeed is that we have to do it all together. You know, I'm the Chamber of Commerce director. I work with business, and I'm trying to grow economy. I look at what we're doing compared to others, and there's a fact in this nation that we have a worldwide or a nationwide. It is worldwide, but more importantly, a nationwide and a local workforce shortage. So, you know, one of our big interests in that is that if we want to truly address that issue, there is nobody that can be left behind. Right? That means that people of every race, every creed, different beliefs, they aren't even Southern Baptists, for God's sake, if you can believe that. We all have to work together to progress as a nation. We're going to have to do that in our communities. We're going to have to do that in our state, and we're going to have to do that in our nation. So one of the things we do is we provide a tool that we have online available, and any of our businesses that want it, we will go visit with them about we don't even know how to deal with young employees. Nevertheless, young employees of different backgrounds and colors and experiences, and we have to figure that out, because what that means for us is success, right? It means we have to get the best out of not only, certainly it starts with children, I think. Some of us adults are too hard-headed to ever change, right? I mean, we're harder. Children they get it, right? We have to get the best out of them. That's what will make us great. If we do not get the best out of them, we will end up with something less than that. And that should not be a standard that any of us aspire to, right? So from a business perspective, that's really what we're trying to do. Figure out the workplace. How do we talk to each other? How do we get the most efficiency and effectiveness out of our employees? And there are some ways that we can do that. I'd say my second interest as the Chamber of Commerce director, which is an economic one too, is about how we interact with the military in this community. We have people in the military here from all backgrounds, from all colors, all religions. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody who's willing to put on the uniform of this country and go out and pay a price for me, perhaps with their life, deserves my respect, deserves my love, deserves my honor. And by the way, I'm going to teach in my household that my daughter does that same thing, right? That she has that love, that honor, and that respect. And whatever that means, we're going to try to meet those needs. So I do think that from the chamber's perspective, we want to do both of those things. Make sure that the military is appreciated here and that feels comfortable here, because, you know, frankly, they're out messing with nuclear weapons every day. I don't want to have them thinking about any stresses they have. And on a serious note, right? We don't want them thinking about the stresses that their kids have in school or that their wife had anywhere in town. So we just want to work together, right? We want to be the people that don't have to go grab the electric fence to do that. And for a minute, I'm going to step back from this as the Chamber of Commerce Director and talk about as a Southern Baptist kid, right, an experience I had. So I was a sophomore at Oklahoma Baptist University sitting in a New Testament class with Dr. Tom Wilkes, who was, in my mind, a phenomenal individual. But we were having a discussion because we just got out of a poli-sci class talking about World War II, and, you know, as 19, 20-year-old males will do, get very excited and exuberant. And we're commenting about how powerful military and what we could do. And he looked at us and said this. He said, "Do you think God loves the kids in America any more than he does in Germany that we bombed?"
Thank you. Stephen Latham.
Sorry about that. I didn't watch the light. Thank you,
Oh,
guys.
you're
Have a
good.
good evening.
You're good.
So first, I want to say thank you to Brave Angels for having me here. And I said, like everybody else, I don't know why, but thank you anyway. And I don't think I'll take all of my 5 minutes, so yeah, no problem. But how's that? All righty. So I did just want to say, for me, as being who I am, every morning I get up and I look at this handsome face in the mirror, and I say, Lord, what is it that you would have me to do for today, and give me that guidance. And every time it's just try to make this world a better place for everyone. So that's my goal each and every day, is to do that. And I get up and I have that in mind when I work, and I work with just about, I think, everybody here at this table. And when I look at myself, you know, I work together. And one thing that I do, if you look at my bio, you'll see, right here you see that I'm president of the local NAACP. But if you look at my bio, you see that I belong to several organizations, just tons. So when people ask me, why am I so busy? That's why. But that's because I try to get out there and I try to work with different people. I try to let them know, to give them the perspective of who I am, and let them know that we're not all what you see on TV. You know, we're different. And I try to let them know I'm just like you. I have kids. In fact, I grew up here in Wyoming, born and raised. So I love this place. And I probably know a lot of you out there in the audience too, because I've been here my whole life. But I try to let them know that, you know, I'm just like you. You know, I get up and I put my pants on the same way you do. And everything that you go through, I go through too. The only big difference is that my skin just might be a little bit darker than yours. So we all do the same thing. I work with so many people, and we have a good time together. I belong to Rotary, and because I'm a service, because I am a pastor also, I'm a service-oriented person. I just want to help and to see people do better. So that's what I do. I work together to do that. And I do that because I feel that's important. And one thing I try to express too is that we all have differing opinions about things, and that's all right. We do not have to agree on everything. I know as being married, you probably understand that husbands and wives don't always agree on everything. But they still live together, and they still seem to work it out, and that's what I try to do. I think I try to express that we need to learn that we can disagree but not be disagreeable. in everything that we do. So in doing that, again, I just try to let everyone know that we need to accept our differences, because that's what makes this country what we are. When I was little, we used to call it the melting pot. And I still believe that's what makes us so great, because we have so many diverse people in this country, and that's what makes us the best. So just accept that, people are different. We don't have to be the same to be best friends. I have friends who are, I'm young, but I have friends who are younger than me, in their 30s, and we go hunting together, so, and to be black and to go and the hunt is just not one of those things you see very often. But we do those kind of things, but we get along, and he knows, and he makes old jokes all the time, but he understands there's differences between us, but we still are the best of friends. I go to his kids' birthday parties and everything like that, and my kids are his age. So, we just need to remember that we all have differences, but that's what makes us the best. And one last thing that I do want to say, well, maybe I will take my whole 5 minutes. One last thing I want to say is that, with us, these conversations need to be had because it's important. Because, I was having these conversations years ago, and we're still having them. So something's not working. So we still need to continue to have them. So, thank you.
Nathan Winters.
Thank you very much. It's a joy to be with you all this evening. And I first of all want to thank Braver Angels for staging the stage this way. We're becoming closer friends right now.
Yeah, we are.
And so thankful for that. Let me start by saying this. In 1978, Alexander Solzhenitsyn made this statement at Harvard University. He was repeating a statement he had made in his famous book. He was a Soviet dissident. And he wrote a book entitled Gulag Archipelago. And in that, he made the statement that the line between good and evil is not between races and classes and political parties. The line between good and evil goes right down the middle of every human heart. And sometimes as we go into these kind of conversations, and I've had the privilege of having coffee several times with my friend to my right, and I just met my friend to my left, but oftentimes in these conversations, we sometimes don't get to the root issue. And that's the reason why oftentimes when you see a conservative on a panel like this, it feels like we're the odd guy out. And yet in reality, I think there's so much that can bring us together, because what I see clearly is the need to tear down walls. And oftentimes in these conversations, what is the feeling is that people get lumped into different people groups as opposed to seeing them as individuals with unique needs. And so that's why I'm glad for the dialogue that's occurring here this evening, and because this is an opportunity in so many ways to set down the monologues we often read and hear and have a genuine dialogue between one another. It is reported recently, the Gallup organization has done a lot of research for several decades. They noticed something that between 2001 and 2013, the vast majority of Americans of all races felt that there was a generally positive conversation and dialogue. But there was a precipitous drop into the negative starting about 2014. And I think one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is why? What occurred, first of all, and secondly, what ideas are being floated around us? Sometime, a little less than a decade ago, ideas entered into the discussion that began to radically affect the relationships that we have seen for a long time in our strive toward a more harmonious society. So the question for us is how to address the issue. And I firmly believe that the answers are found in the foremost and most venerable book ever known in human history. The very opening chapter of that book, we are told that every human being is created in the imago Dei, the image of God. That we are created, every one of us, equal truly. That is the historic understanding that this country, for all of its good and ills, has fought for. Every single society that has ever existed has had its good, its bad, and ugly. But one of the things that this country has done and done well is it has fought the ugly. And it's time in our generation to fight the ugly even more. So the question is, how do we do that? First of all, I believe it comes down to the strengthening of families. That's the reason why I've been invited here this evening. Let me say it this way. A Democratic senator I respect very much, in the 1970s did a deep study. His name was Dr. Daniel Patrick Moynihan. The Moynihan Report reported that the breakdown in our society today, and oftentimes in our discussions, was a breakdown that centered around the family. And if we could actually begin to help families, moms and dads, learn and teach and strengthen them up in this society, I believe that we can make a major difference. And let me just address one more thing. As one of the individuals that has pushed against the idea of bias-motivated crimes back when I was in the legislature, let me just say that oftentimes what we've watched across the country is that when people bring bias-motivated crimes bills, they have been used to essentially allow for viewpoint discrimination. And so we don't want that. What we want is what we're seeing tonight, genuine and open dialogue, and rather than just the monologues we so often see. With that, thank you so much for the privilege of being here.
Rabbi Moshe Halfon.
You got it right. Hi, thank you. I know some of you. I've recognized a few faces. You may have seen me around town. I always wear berets. If you see me in King Super, I'm just shopping, folks. And I don't have to answer the question or question myself, why am I here? Because there's only one rabbi in town, and they had to have him. That's what happens to me everywhere I go. And another quite simple excuse, I moved here from California, so I tend to be a little more of the liberal persuasion. You can look at my bio. I didn't know what they wanted, so I sent what's on the synagogue's website. And I'm not boasting. I'm literally am an example of this multicultural thing. I'm the bee who goes from flower to flower, and I say, oh, you guys play these kind of drums? We play those kind of drums. Will you play that kind of instrument? So I drum with Nigerians. I studied with some of the best. I meditate with Buddhists. You might see me in a yoga class. When I lived in New England, I would go up in the woods and hang out with some of the unusual people that were up there. You can use the P word if you like, Wiccans or whatever. Anyway, people who dance in the woods. But I'm grounded in my people, with my tribe. So I'm also a culture vulture. So I got a couple of nice little jokes or references from American culture. Some of you are familiar with Blazing Saddles. It probably wouldn't be made today because of all the colorful language that was used in it. Actually, Cleavon Little played the sheriff, but the script or the idea came from Richard Pryor, who kind of sold it to Mel Brooks. So in Blazing Saddles, there's a great scene at the end of the movie. I'm not giving it away. You've all seen it anyway, where this the black railroad workers, who helped out to save the village of Rock Ridge, and they go to the people in the village, the white folks mostly, and they say, you know what, we want something too. We want a piece of the action. And so the people in the town, the mayor or whatever, says, all right, you guys can have something, but no Irish, So that's the motto. So another cultural reference is the song that my parents were really Broadway show people. In South Pacific, both the book and then the play, the movie, there's a nurse or somebody who says, you've got to be carefully taught to be a racist. She's talking about the Pacific Islanders. People, the armed forces guys are like, oh, those people are weird, unusual eyes and stuff. I can't read the whole thing, but look up, you've got to be carefully taught. Basically, what the song says is, you got to sit down with a kid early on and say, those people over there are different and you should hate them. That's how racism is taught. So here's a couple of those things. Now, another story, I'm older than I look, but I'm not that old. There was a rabbi from Berlin named Joachim Prinz who survived, and he was in Germany during the Hitler regime, but he got out in time, became the rabbi of a synagogue in Princeton. So Prince from Princeton. And he was the representative from the Jewish community in 1963 at the March on Washington. So he came right after Odetta and right before, not exactly, I'm joking, but Peter, Paul, and Mary. If anybody old enough to remember those days? Yeah. And Dr. King at the famous I Have a Dream speech. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I've discovered this again. He said, I speak to you as an American Jew. As Jews, we bring to this great demonstration, in which thousands of us were proudly participating, a twofold experience, one of the spirit and one of history. And he goes on to say, we lived under oppression for 2,000 years, 3,000 years during the Middle Ages. And it's for that reason I'm here, he says, not just for sympathy, but because your story is my story and my story is your story. He says, this is the most salient thing if you want to come away with anything. When I was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime, I learned many things. The most important thing I learned under those tragic circumstances was that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and most tragic problem is silence. Yeah. So, he stood arm to arm. There are other rabbis. Another famous rabbi, Abraham Joshua Heschel, marched with King. But, that's ancient history. What are you talking about? Somebody said, why are we still talking about this in 2023? It should be obvious that there is only one race, the human race, and maybe even the animals. Another thing I'll just share with you is things have a synchronicity about them. My people are in the middle of a beautiful holiday that, if you look up in your Bible, is called the Feast of Tabernacles. So we built this funny little Gilligan's Island hut in our backyards and in the back of the synagogue, and we're supposed to eat a meal in it, or several meals. But it's more than just a symbol of the farmers. It became the roots of Thanksgiving. That's what the Pilgrims borrowed, that idea of thankfulness, the fall harvest festival. But it also is a symbol of unity, hospitality, welcoming people. And you have to have people into your sukkah in my backyard. It's called a sukkah. I had my friend who's the guy who does my lawn. He's also he's not a gardener. He's a retired man who does gardening. And I said, Howard, you got to come and eat in the sukkah, and I have to feed you. And he's a Christian. And he sat in the sukkah, he gave him a bagel, and he sat and he did grace. So I fulfilled the mitzvah of having a hospitality.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Pastor Tom Perea.
Is that it? That's my time.
Good evening. I'm Pastor Tom, and I've been here in Cheyenne for 23 years. Thank you, Braver Angels, for allowing the faith community to come in and to share our perspective, where a lot of times we're getting pushed out of the community for various reasons. So I do appreciate, and I appreciate you all being here, because we all have the same concerns, that we can live together in a harmonious way. I come with a little bit of expertise. I've been Hispanic all my life. Matter of fact, I was born this way, but also Hispanic, sin-fallen individual. And I think as we look at what we can bring to the table, not only to make it better, to how to improve racial and ethnic relations, but how to cure it. And I believe we have that answer, the cure for racism, because racism is one of many sins. And I think when we look at it, and we look at our people at our church, the problem is sin. And we have the cure for that. Matter of fact, one of our mission statement at our church says this: it is the mission of Restoration Fellowship International to be a church that experiences and manifests the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We will accomplish this by being a church for all people of all races, laying down our differences at the foot of the cross. It's the cross where we can make those differences together. And so I don't want to be real preaching tonight, but I am a preacher. And so I'm going to try to relay my point in a way that I can just encourage us to seek the answers, not just solutions or to how to make it better, but how to answer and cure the problem. I want to just talk a couple of stories of the positive side of it. I've experienced the negative. I've been called spick. I know a lot of the negative aspects of racism. But I grew up in a white community. My family was probably some of the first Hispanics to move into that community. And our neighbor across the street was a wonderful Mormon lady that reached out to us, a Caucasian Mormon lady that reached out to us and touched our lives and helped us in a lot of ways. And also I had a scoutmaster Caucasian Scoutmaster that was a Mormon also. I was raised in Utah. He helped me go all the way through the program to become an Eagle Scout. I may beg to differ with the Mormon religion theologically, but I think we come together morally in a lot of ways, where what I'm getting at is religion and our religious views are very important to society. And so we need to realize that we need, first of all and foremost, we need to keep freedom of religion, number one. We really need to have that in our society. We may beg to differ with each other, but God is important. God is important in our lives. Without God, we will never solve this problem, so we can't push God out of the picture. Now, my story. I'm sin-fallen. I was born this way. I do have aspects of racism. I appreciate my brother, my friend over here, admitting that we all have that issue. If we'd be honest with ourselves, we have prejudices. We all have aspects of racism, but it's because we're sin-fallen. And we're very egocentric, we're very selfish, and that's just the way we were born. Relation problems have gone back since the beginning, since Adam and Eve fell in the Garden of Eden. The first relational problem was when Cain killed Abel. Relationships have had problems ever since then. And so the cure for me, in my aspect of being self-centered, was giving my life to Jesus Christ. Romans 3:23 says that for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. When I talk about equality, well, everyone in this room are equally sin-fallen. We have a propensity to sin. And so we're sin-fallen. And with that, the Bible teaches that because of sin, we're all going to die. We know that physically. But relationships have died too because of that. And so understanding that, we realize we need someone to deliver us from ourselves. And that's where God comes in. And Jesus Christ comes in. Because it says that while I was yet a sinner, Christ died for me. He didn't wait for me to straighten up my act and cure these things. He died for me. And he says the only thing that I would have to do is call upon him. And that's my experience. And when I called upon Jesus Christ, because I was in my fallen state, selfishness, arrogant, I was racist. I mean, I can tell you the stories that I've had, and that I not only received it, but I've given it in a lot of ways. God delivered me from that and made me a new person to where now I can truly love. You see, you can't love until you experience love, until you experience God's love. So anyways, I just want to share that with you, my experience, that when we have peace with God, we'll have peace with one another. When we have God's love, we'll be able to love one another.
Thanks,
so our
Pastor.
church brings that to the table.
Thank you, Pastor. Colonel Johnny Galbert.
Thank you. Let's see if I can get this right. I do have time left, right? Okay.
You are good.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Colonel Johnny Galbert, the commander, 9th Missile Wing. So excited to be here. Thanks to the panel members. Thanks to Ed and Tom for inviting me. And so they sent me a letter in the mail, and then they showed up in my office. And so I don't think I was going to be able to get out of this one. But it's not the easiest thing for me to do, to be up here discussing this topic in uniform. There's lots of pitfalls that I have to navigate, but it's important, and I'm definitely excited to be here. And then I've got my legal guy in the back and my public affairs, and so before I say something I'm not supposed to, they're just going to pull the fire alarm, and we're all going to run. So, yeah. But I am really honored to represent the over 4,200 men and women at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, those wearing the uniform. And so from a military perspective, this is a readiness issue. It's a readiness issue. It's not the easiest thing in the world for our dependents, our spouses, our families to move around the country doing what we do, trying to accomplish the mission. For me, this is all about our airmen and their families being treated with dignity and respect. That's what it boils down to. And so I knew for a while that I was coming back to this community. I've been here. This is my wife and I. This is our third time here in Cheyenne. And so I'm sitting at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota this time last year and reading about what's going on in Cheyenne. And I'm just kind of shell-shocked because it's not the community that I, learned to love back when I was here a couple times before. And so I knew that when I got here, we were going to have some issues and challenges, but I also knew that we had great community partners that would help us get it done. And so I heard someone mention, I think it was Dale, talking about the mission and what we do with nuclear weapons. And so can you imagine trying to be on nuclear alert duty, but worried that your kid is getting bullied and called racial slurs at school? You know, how can you focus on your job? Or can you imagine being a single mom at home and your significant other is, you know, trying to do the mission, but when they're downtown, they get, you know, called racial slurs or told that you don't belong here or told that, hey, I could have 3 bullets in you before I blink? This is a military readiness issue for us. And so we've had to expedite transfer folks out of here. There's people that were excited about doing the job, but they don't want to come to Cheyenne. That's why for us, it's a readiness issue. Diversity is a strength of ours. It's a strength. We have folks from all different types of backgrounds, ethnicities. They just want to serve their country. And they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, them and their families. So what can I do from a military perspective? And so we're doing a couple of things on base. One thing I'm trying to do is open the base. I think after 9/11, we just sort of closed the gates, and COVID didn't help at all. And so I want more people like you to be on my base. I want more people like you to come onto the base, see our diversity, and prove to you, demonstrate to you that it is a strength. I want to highlight our outstanding airmen and their families to you. So I'm going to be asking you, I'm going to be looking for ways and ideas and suggestions for you to get onto the base. We've got some programs around town, adopted airmen, honorary commanders. We're going to try to get those folks on base. And then the second part of that is we're going to get out into the community. I do a lot of community engagement. I've been talking to my folks about getting out, participating, and doing some things around the school, around the YMCA, LCCC. There's a lot of opportunity for our airmen to get out into the community, get from behind the gates, and interact with folks. And then we also appreciate the partnership we have with the community. Dale and Mayor Collins, I know we're doing a lot of great things. I appreciate all the education, the training, Carolyn, what you guys do, bringing folks from across the country, flying them out here to educate on ethnic sensitivity and biases and things of that nature and hate. The base is a partner in that. And so for those of you that don't know, we grew up together. We've been here since 1867, the base and the community, and we're not going anywhere. So I guess I'll end. I didn't bring a quote with me, but when I walked in the room, my wife and I looked at this quote up here, and it resonated with me. I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. And I just think that embodies what the Braver Angels was trying to do. And so excited for us to tackle this problem together. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Galbert. And I will take this. Yes, please give a round of applause for all our panelists. I hope the panelists will forgive me for cutting some of you off a little bit at the end, but I think we got your key points. And so thank you so much for all of you for being here. For the audience, please pass the cards with your questions on. 2 minutes to answer a question. Now, some of these questions, get a little feedback there. I'm not sure if it's because of the mic. I look guilty. It's me. I am not an AV expert, but holding it in my hand works better. If you have questions to turn in, are those from the screeners? Okay. Then I am going to ask our timer to turn on the green light at 1 minute, 30 seconds later, the yellow light, and at 2 minutes, the red. Now, if you're a panelist and I start to cut you off and you say, I need another 30 seconds, ask for it and I'll give it to you. Okay? Because some of these questions you may not be able to, I haven't even looked at them yet, but we want to give you an opportunity to answer the questions fairly. For the audience, again, we're going to ask you to hold your applause and your interjections, whether they're positive or negative, hold them we want to get through as many of these as possible and get everybody, get the end of this on time. So with that, let's see, the topic question is, for the panelists, I want to encourage you to stay on the track of how does or could your organization or community group improve racial ethnic relations, specifically within Laramie County. And when you're going to get the mic from Pastor Stevie Gannison there, go ahead and hold it up like I'm having to do here. And part of the reason is, even if the audience can hear you, we are recording this. So to be heard, we would like to have you speak into the mic. Our first, the question is, how does, well, the overarching question that this will speak to is, how does or could your organization or community group improve racial ethnic relations, specifically within Laramie County? So the first question is for Mayor Collins. Mayor, we know of your personal concerns about negative race ethnic relations in our city. What departments are teaming up with you to address the need for better relations?
I'm not sure I can answer that question maybe directly, but one of the things we've been working hard on is, I talked earlier about boards and commissions, and trying to find people who are qualified, first of all, but make sure that our boards and commissions have folks that represent all of our community. And so if you look at a lot of the recent appointments that we've been making, they're not all 63-year-old white guys like me. They're a little bit different than that. And I think it's important because it was interesting. We had the chief of staff at the Air Force here, and he told us we need to start being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that that's exactly true. We need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is, we need to be together. And I would say it almost like we have to force ourselves to be together, at least at the beginning. And I would like to say personally thank you to some folks here in Cheyenne. You know, Dr. Peoples makes sure that I'm invited to the MAFA. Pastor McClendon is making sure that, you know, I have an opportunity to come and visit with him. Stevie Gannison invited me to his opportunity, Pastor Gannison here, when he got sworn in. So I think it's important that we invite each other to different events. And you know, at first they're uncomfortable. I sat for 4 hours and watched that man get sworn in to his pastorship. That was uncomfortable. That's a long time for me. But it's important for us to get to know each other and to do that. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. And the other thing we're doing is reaching out and trying to find people that we hire that also represent our community. And so those are some of the things that we're doing at the city level.
Thank you. The next question is for Chief Francisco. Chief, what is the Cheyenne Police Department doing to make sure policing in Cheyenne is equitable?
You know, one of the things I spoke of at the beginning was transparency. So we endeavor to be transparent in a number of ways. One of them's our annual report, which shows all of our activity and the racial makeup of the individuals we deal with, because we want people to see that. And you know, on a broader scale, I had the opportunity to attend some training years ago, and the notion of the training was unconditional respect. And it really resonated with me, and I'm trying to instill that culture here. And you know, frankly, many of the people have it. And the notion of unconditional respect is you, as an individual, don't need to earn my respect. You have it from the moment we speak. You may not keep it, but you start with it. No matter your station in life, no matter the situation we encounter you, we start with unconditional respect. And I think that goes, you know, people want that. People need that. They deserve it. So when they don't feel like they're being spoken down to or treated in a manner that is less than or anything like that. So, you know, that's my goal, is to instill that culture in the Cheyenne Police Department. And, you know, I'm pleased to say, at least in my observation, that it's not going to be a heavy lift. The people here enjoy interacting with the community. And, you know, I want to maintain that. I want to keep that going. So I think that's a culture that you just set. And I'm happy to say I think we've had some success with that.
Thank you. The next question is for Chris Zimney. What programs in Laramie County School District Number 1 offering is the district offering to teachers and students to address the issues around bias?
So there's a couple of things we do, not only through staff development for our teachers, bringing in nationally renowned speakers to talk to and educate our staffs on those issues. We also have internal trainers on those types of issues, specific programs that we talk about that promote both wellness, understanding, empathy, civility, involved in both our student groups, such as DECA, FBLA, civil groups. We're also with our Sources of Strength. Shameless plug right here. If you want to know more, talk to me later. But we want to make sure that we're also talking about those things in our regular education. So talking about in social studies, what has happened historically, because the quote has always been, those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And so making sure that we have those discussions with primary source materials. If people don't know what that means, it's like directly from those that live the experience. Making sure that we're sharing that information with our students, talking about the reality of what happened at that time, but also inviting them into the conversation to talk about what did they glean from that lesson. So testing their learning within the classroom as well to what did they withdraw from that. So not only our staff development, our groups that we run, but also in our educational environment.
Thank you. Next question is for Representative Dan Zwanitzer. Got the wrong one. What is your stand on teaching the history of the United States to include slavery, genocide, etc.?
So actually, I'm teaching in Political Science 1000 at LCCC this semester, and some of the biggest battles in the education system right now is curriculum is being pushed back on by both sides that it's potentially racist or it's too biased to one side. It is difficult, but I think that we have to understand and appreciate our history and where we've come from. I do think that's not always, it's a fight that goes to the legislature, but we've tried to make that go to the State Board of Education, to your local school boards. And so that goes back to your Laramie County School Board on some of the finer aspects of what the curriculum is. But I'm certainly not concerned at all about teaching the good, the bad, and the ugly of American history. I think we are doomed to repeat it unless we can have honest conversations with all viewpoints about where we've come from and how we got to where we are, and why some of the issues we're still dealing with 250 years later, are based on the founding of our country and how we founded this Constitution, and the really important debates that went on then to, that pushed slavery to 1808, and then it resulted in the Civil War. So I don't think we can be afraid of our history, and we have to be, still proud of how far we've come from where we were, and we don't, I think, say that enough, that we're not moving as fast as a lot of people want when it comes to race relations, but we have had a steady march of progress, and I think that's important to celebrate when we can.
Thank you. The next question is for Pastor Tom Perea. What sort of interfaith activities could be pursued to positively impact race relations? And on some of these questions, the areas of responsibility overlap, and so I might redirect this later to another one of the faith community people at the table.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What sort of interfaith activities could be pursued to positively impact race relations?
I think we have different organizations such as Cheyenne Association of Evangelicals, and that's important to, I think, come together. I meet with pastors regularly on a Tuesday morning for prayer. Got friends. I think we need to be intentional about reaching out to one another. They say that church is the most segregated place on a Sunday morning, and I think we need to be intentional about making that not the case. I'm very thankful for our church. We're very diverse. We're multicultural, multi-ethnic church. That's where you see the love of God that changes lives. We have Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians in our church. Matter of fact, we have Broncos sit next to Raider fans. And they even allow me to be a part of it. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. So anyways.
Okay. And I'd like to redirect that to the rabbi. Yeah, I thought you might have some.
Well, some of the things that are funny and interesting about Mount Sinai, when I was getting ready to move here, I was surprised myself to find out that the Jews moved here with the railroads in the 1860s. They've been here a long, long time. And look at Lincoln Way, and a lot of those old buildings were at one time little inns and things owned by Jewish folks. So I was surprised myself. What the synagogue already does is fascinating. Some of you know that we kind of took a page from the Greek church down the street, and in June-ish, June somewhere in there, look for it, the Yiddish festival is huge. I'm amazed myself. So it's a Yiddish culture festival, no religion. I mean, people come and they ask the rabbi questions. But last year, 2 years, we had a klezmer band, that's Jewish jazz, and come and get food. But I say that not to boast or invite you, but just say, that's the way. And I went to the Greek festival, which is sponsored by that church. And it happened to me on Rosh Hashanah. You know, I went right after services, I went over to the building. So many people have approached us, or they get emails, and they say, you know, can I go visit you? Well, duh, of course. You know, so the synagogue is an open place. I think what we should be doing more is more interracial and more. I'm beginning to speak in churches, and I love to do that. And I'm asking myself to be invited to preach or to come. One of my dear friends just retired, Roger McDaniel, if you all know, is retiring from Highland Presbyterian. So, and somewhere in the back is Elizabeth Mount from the UU. So I guess what we should be doing more of is crossing the racial and ethnic lines, but there's a lot of interfaith group. I'm in the Cheyenne Interfaith Council. I'm also on the board of the Wyoming Interfaith Network, which is statewide. If I can answer the one that was asked to the education director, I think critical race theory is American history. It is not something to be scared of. I just had to say that. It's real, folks, and we got to confront our own history. By the way, I really don't identify as a white person, even though I pass as one. My parents are from Turkey, but you know, my mother was darker than my father was. Race, by the way, last thing I'll say, race is a made-up term. The whole racial thing we began in the 1600s to justify the slave trade. Let's be real, folks.
Thank you. Next question is for Amy Speaker. Should race and ethnic relations be measured for future community health needs assessments? For Amy Speaker.
Thank you for that question. So for those that don't know, Cheyenne Regional every 3 years looks at the health of the community with our partners to identify the needs within our community. And currently we're working on needs around access to care, housing, transportation, and, I'm going to forget the third one. I'm going to forget it right now. I'm on the spot. I can make sure that we get that information to you. But the question about whether race and ethnicity should be included is a definite yes. And in our past needs assessments, we have looked at race and ethnicity where we've been able to. Sometimes when we look at outcomes that are pretty small or rare, which is good. Sometimes that we have rare outcomes, it can be hard to look and see differences in the quantitative data. So we often look at qualitative data and ask for people's experiences so that we can really understand how those differences persist in our community. So the answer is yes, they should be included in our assessments. When we looked in our last needs assessment, which was conducted in 2020, it was published in 2022, one of the things that we did see was by zip code, which is a little bit larger populations. But we could see that there were disparities in who was affected by COVID in our community, both in emergency room visits and in hospitalizations based on where you lived. So we know that those differences in who is affected by different health outcomes can be based on where we live, how much education we have, our race, our ethnicities. All of those things can impact. And so then when we look at how we address those health issues, we have to take into account those underlying issues.
Thank you. Next question is for Pastor Stephen Latham. Where do you see hope for improving race-ethnic relations in Cheyenne? And you can speak to this with any of your many hats.
Repeat the question, please.
Where do you see hope for improving race-ethnic relations in Cheyenne? And you have, as you explained in your initial comments, you could talk to this from your congregation perspective, you could talk to this from NAACP, you could talk to this from the Rotary. So where you run with this in your 2 minutes is up to you, Pastor.
All right, so I'm just going to speak to it from all of them. So I see hope in the church. We as people of faith, I see us as reaching out and trying to take the lead in some of these things and trying to bring people together. So I definitely see that. Nathan and I, we have coffee together sometimes, and we're planning to do it again because we want to bring us all together. And the only way to do that is when people see the leaders getting together, then they're going to come together. Just as the leader of NAACP, I look at us as trying to do things like when we do Juneteenth, that celebration is for everybody. Mrs. Gatlin did it this past year and did a wonderful job. And it's for everyone. It is not for black people. You know, when we talk about history, it's American history. It may have happened to black people, but it happened in America. So everybody come, and we try to do those things and invite everybody. When we do our MLK, Martin Luther King program in January to celebrate his birthday, and Pastor McClendon, who is over the Ministerial Alliance, we need to address that too, the Black Ministerial Alliance. We invite everybody. We invite everybody to that. So we try to do events that will bring everybody together. And I know Tom was saying they have an organization and we have one, and that's part of the biggest problem right there because we should have an organization to where we're all together. So that's one thing we need to work on. And I see hope because, you know, things like this, when people are come together to listen, to talk about the differences, to say, even though we may not agree about it, we're still sitting and listening to one another and listening to their points of view. As I said earlier, we don't have to agree. Just listen and see what their point of view is. And maybe you might get that aha moment and say, now I understand. So I see hope. I see hope in the schools. I see hope just in the healthcare field with Dr. Speaker. I just see hope all over the place. So.
Thank you. Next question is, I'm going to edit it a little bit for shortness, but it goes to Nathan Winters. And it relates to the family. Growing up in a racist home where my father is still actively racist, how do we teach kids there is a different way when a home life dictates and teaches us how we will be accepted?
Thank you. I think I understand the question, and let me just point out by the nature of the question that it is wonderful to watch as an individual who may have heard those kind of things growing up has grown up to not be racist. And so I think what we have is we have to submit every theory, every idea to the clear and cold light of reason. And that's why the intellectual muscularity that's necessary to build out a strong society is so important for us today, which is the reason why I passionately disagree with the idea of critical race theory. An idea that came up in the 1990s, and as we watch it, I do not believe that anyone is born a racist based upon the color of their skin. Such an idea is itself racist. As a result of that, what we have to do is have the opportunity to genuinely sit down with friends over coffee and talk about the core issues, that we're all created in the image of God, and that we all have the opportunity to correspond with one another in genuine love, not based upon creed or color, but based upon a shared understanding of what it means to live in the freest nation on the planet. And as a result of that, when you look backwards in history, let me just say this real quickly. When you look backwards in history and how we excised slavery from this country, It took the death of over 500,000 individuals. And so to go backwards in history and tell that mother who lit a candle every night because her son couldn't come home because he died on a distant battlefield, that her sacrifice was not worthy, is something I could never stand for. And I believe that history tells us that it has been a struggle, but we have fought hard and we have done something great in this country. And that's why I'm so passionate and am a student and even going through grad classes now in the subject of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Colonel Galbert. Pass the mic down that way. How are race relations at Warren Air Force Base compared to other bases at which you have been assigned?
A very good question. I don't know. Did my wife ask that question? I think for the most part, it's pretty much, and I've had a pretty good experience, I think it's pretty much been the same. But what you have to take into account, I came on active duty in 2001. I've been around a little bit, been doing this for about 23 years. And for whatever reason, the last 5 to 10 years, race relations around the country have changed. And we could probably be here all night to debate how they've changed. But, as a young lieutenant, my first duty station was Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And it was not a very diverse area. You had more Hispanics, didn't have as many African Americans. But the base was always kind of a sanctuary. And I don't recall a lot of issues in the community. But when you ask me, how has it changed? That's probably the thing that I would go with. The political climate is a lot more volatile, and in uniform, we don't play politics, and so I don't talk to my young airmen about some of the topics that we hear in the news or that are being debated around the country. I'm focused on what my young people, what my airmen need to accomplish the mission. And so the things that we study, the things that we do to train are all mission focused. And then we don't worry ourselves with the distractions that are going on with the politics. And we embrace each other, we embrace our diversity, and we focus on that and try to avoid the other things that are going on that may be negative around society at this time. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. The next question is going to start with Dale Steenbergen, but it affects multiple spheres. And the first sphere is the business community, but Amy and Chris, you should also pay attention because I'm going to redirect it to you two later. How is the influx of Spanish-speaking immigrants impacting our communities, our businesses, our schools, and our health services? What plans are in place to accommodate their assimilation into our country?
Are you sure I can't let them go first? That's a tough question.
You can.
Certainly the Hispanic population is growing across the country, right? And it's become a very politically hot topic, and there's people on all sides of it. I think what we got to figure out is, how do we integrate these folks that are here? How do we get them as a working part of our community, right? How do we do it better as we look around? I talked to some of my friends from other places, and they've got big problems with this issue, and it's hard on the healthcare system. It's hard. I get problems from every direction. I guess the question is, I go back to the question Colonel Galbert just talked about, is that how are we compared to everybody else? How are we going to be the best that we can be? And so I don't know if I have a specific answer for you on that. It is a growing population in this country, and we need to figure out how to make them a growing part of this nation and figure out how to do it as well as anybody else. And I think at the end of the day, that's really the question is, how do we judge ourselves? Is okay good enough, right? Or we want something better. And I just think on this whole topic, we gotta assume that we talk about Wyoming being the best place on earth. Let's hold that standard, right? Let's hold ourselves to that standard. It's easy to say things. It's a lot harder to make it in practice. So I'll let some of these professionals go further with that.
Go ahead and pass just to the right. And do you want to repeat, or are you good, Amy?
I think I'm okay. So I know at Cheyenne Regional, I can't speak to all that we're doing. You know, I'm very much on the community side. So on the hospital side, there are many people working on this. I will say that it is really, we've had some recent upgrades. If you've come to the hospital recently, you'll see that a lot of our signage is now in both English and Spanish, so that we're hoping to direct people more readily to where they need to be. We have always, well, not always, we've been around a long time, so I can't say always, but for the whole time I've been there the last 5 years, of course, we offer language access through a language access line so that people can hear about their diagnoses and their communicate with their doctor in their native language. It's really important that people are able to share in their native language what's going on and understand back what their recommendations are so that they can understand what comes next. I can speak for one of the things that I get to help with is our WIC clinic, so the the Women, Infant, and Children's Clinic, which is a supplemental nutrition program for women and young kids. And we have recently budgeted for training to make sure that our front desk staff can have some basic Spanish skills to help the population that's Spanish speaking that's receiving services. So really making sure that our services are available in both Spanish and English has been a high priority as we're welcoming this population to our community.
Chris Simney.
Ditto. Do I get away with that? No.
No.
Okay. So within education, there's a thing called bilingual education, where we actually try to work with students not only to in their native language, but also teaching them English. Because quite a few of our families that are coming in, that's their primary language. Their language from birth has been Spanish. And so they're coming in learning English, and a lot of our teachers only know English. And so working towards making some of our programs bilingual so that those students can access the information in their native language while learning English. Through that program, there are English language learners. That's what the designation is for those individuals. And we also work in the language arts classes. So for the Hathaway Scholarship programs, everybody's hopefully heard of Hathaway. If you haven't, please come see us if you got little kids. Very good program. One of the requirements of that is taking some sort of foreign language. And so we have various languages. We have translation services through the district. I would defer to my bosses who are in the room. Hello. On exactly how many languages are actually spoken. Primarily, second language is Spanish. But after that, we have various other languages that are spoken in our school district that we need to get services for. We are working to have more of our materials in both English and Spanish. It is a taxing process to be able to get those things translated, but that is one thing that we're working on. And if I butcher this, I'm going to hear about it tomorrow from various people. But our bilingual seal of literacy, did I say that right? Jane Lessinger's going to beat the tar out of me tomorrow. But it's also a part of our English language arts program to also certify bilingual education.
Thank you. Our last question on our regular schedule is for Judge Jeffrey. So if you could pass that over to him. Tom Brantley, are you going to, is it Ed or Tom going to pick up next? So after this question, I'm going to turn it back to one of our co-chairs. And you can judge the time and whether you want to field any more questions from redirects later. Okay, Tom? Judge Jeffrey, does anyone have experience with restorative justice? Does it have a role in improving race relations in Cheyenne? Please explain.
Well, the concept of restorative justice, as I'm aware, that you can use the court system, can you hear me okay? Is that what you're indicating? Okay. that you can use the courts, you can use when young people or anybody is going through court as a method to help them understand some of the harm they've caused and to also help victims relate to the fact that they are cared about and that they are being treated in a way that is sensitive to some of their needs, to what their needs are too. Restorative justice is about restoring, bringing people back to a state where they understand they've done something, they understand what they've done has caused harm, and at the same time, it's also a method of involving people that have been harmed in getting some satisfaction for what has occurred for them. Give me the second part of that question. That's what it is, but.
I need to hold up my mic. Does it have a role in improving race relations in Cheyenne? Please explain.
It depends how you approach it. I think it has a role with everybody. I like the concept of it because it's simply about engaging everybody in the process. So whether or not you're a person of color or a person of a different background doesn't matter. Restorative justice is about, trying to bring people back to a point where they can understand, as I said before, what they did, and those people that have been victimized can understand what has happened to them and see that something is being done about it. So I think it applies in any situation. Doesn't matter whether race is involved or not. It's simply a concept that I think is a helpful way to approach dealing with problems. Well, does that answer your question for that?
You have, according to our timing lights, you have another minute, as long as it's
Well,
somehow
let me just say
related.
something in general about that. I hope that answered the person's question about that. I've listened to a lot of things that have been said tonight, and I agree with a lot that has been said, but I also disagree with some of it. I want to make a couple of comments about that. The question was asked about individual hope for, what is the hope for improving race relations in Cheyenne? And I'll tell you something I wrote down there, individual acceptance of responsibility for change. And Stevie may know this song or this poem or what it was. The question was asked to God about why are you letting all these problems happen? Why are you letting these bad things happen? And why don't you do something about it? And the last line in there was, I did. I created you. And so as we keep talking about it is, we have got to be the ones to do something about it. I have one other comment I want to make, and that's about the fact that I do not like any concept that involves controlling what you learn, involves limiting what you're able to do, because I think what it does is suggest to young people that you're not capable of understanding and making decisions for yourself. So I have my problems with that. I think that the more people are exposed to, the more they're aware of, the more opportunity they have to learn and experience everything they can, they will separate it out. I'm going to get this in here before he cuts me off. I judged a We the People contest in Washington, D.C. I didn't want to originally get involved with that because I thought, it's going to be a lot of, real strong conservative over the level that it should be in terms of we got to do it this way or that way. What I found was this. People like us are the problem. It's not the kids. Kids look at things, they learn, they understand, and they were open to everything, open to ideas. We as adults have been the ones to control that. I saw that little baby back there, and I thought how untouched that baby was with our junk until we put that junk there. I don't believe learning is what does it. I believe limiting what you learn is what creates that problem.
And with that, that will be our last question. Let's give a round of applause for all of our panelists' questions.
Thank you, Bob, for that terrific job of moderating this unruly panel, keeping everything under control. Is that better? Okay, good. Oh yeah, okay. Is that better? Good. And thank you, panel. Boy, we are really privileged to have such a distinguished and well-qualified panel of community leaders and experts to come out and spend their evening with us to discuss this important issue. We have a token of our appreciation for each of you, one that will remind you of Braver Angels and hopefully encourage you to stay involved. Stevie's going to be passing those out now. And thank you, by the way, Stevie, for that lovely song earlier on. I was hoping you'd sing for us. thank you all for, yeah, he's got a great voice. I go to his church and hear him sing. It's worth the trip. Thank you all of you who are members of Braver Angels, and those of you who are not members, please join. It's only $12 a year. It's easy to join. You just go to braverangels.org and sign up. And, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they're, thank you notes inside each one. Yeah, okay. We'll sort that out there. So we're hoping that this is not going to be the end of this discussion about improving racial and ethnic relations in Laramie County. The discussion tonight has suggested several further activities that might be taken along this line, and we hope that each of you will give some thought to this and forward suggestions to us for further activities and other organizations that we might work with in this endeavor. Braver Angels has as its broad mission depolarization and bridging divides. And the Laramie County Alliance, or chapter of Braver Angels, is planning several events for the upcoming year. We are hoping to hold Braver Angels style debates, a town hall or common ground workshop on homelessness or other issues of interest to you, and workshops on depolarization and listening and speaking skills. So we're also planning on hoping to have a fellowship event over the holidays, maybe with a film discussion. So this is your alliance. This is a volunteer organization. It's your alliance, so please stay involved and help us plan events. Give us your ideas, volunteer. Before you leave, Ed's reminding me again and again to drop your survey off in the box over there. And also there's a volunteer sign-up sheet. Consider volunteering. You can volunteer in a number of ways. You can even be on our planning committee and help plan these events. So with that, I think I would like to encourage anybody that would like to have their picture taken. This is kind of a tradition we have. We gather around the banner up here. You know, if you're comfortable having your picture taken, having it shared on social media, stay afterwards and we'll do that. Otherwise, please feel free to stay around until about 8:30 for just informal conversation. And thank you all for coming, and hope to see you at our next event. And somebody's holding flyers back there in the back, so you can stop by and see him if you want. Thank you very much.